Hello and welcome to a very special Christmas edition of Easy Stories in English. I'm Ariel Goodbody, your host for this video, and today I'm going to show you how to make a traditional British Christmas dessert, the mince pie. Now, there's a lot to be said about British cooking, mostly that it's very bad, but we do have some good dishes, and in my opinion, the mince pie is one of the best. Mince pies, as you can see, are pies, pastries, and they have a sweet fruit filling inside. There you go, you can see inside of this mince pie, maybe you can't see. Look, mince pie, delicious. It's got fruit inside, so it's sweet, but it's not too sweet, and it has a nice soft outside pastry. Originally, mince pies had meat in them, and so we call the filling inside the pie mincemeat. But don't worry, there's no meat in this recipe. So these mince pies you buy from the shop, they're very good. We usually eat quite a lot of them around Christmas, but in my family, we have our own family recipe for mince pies, and they're a bit different from the shop-bought mince pies. Our ones have a thinner crust and it's a bit harder, it's more like a biscuit. I really like it because you can put brandy or brandy butter on top, which is basically just brandy mixed with butter and sugar. It's amazing. So basically, they're just a vehicle for alcohol. And if that isn't the best thing about Christmas, I don't know what is. I'm saying this as someone who doesn't really drink anymore, and I'm currently on medication which I shouldn't drink alcohol with. But look, Christmas alcohol, classic combination. So today, I'm going to show you how to make mince pies with my family recipe. This is the first time I've ever made them myself using this recipe, so it might go horribly wrong, but we'll have fun, hopefully. Now, this recipe originally makes a lot of mince pies. It makes about 48, so I've halved it because that's too many, right? I live with one other person. Sure, we can give mince pies to friends and family members, but 24 is probably enough. So I'm going to show you first how to make the mincemeat, then how to make the pastry, and then you put them in the oven. I think the last part isn't too difficult. The recipe looks quite simple. I'm going to be doing a lot of cutting because I don't have a food processor, and you're supposed to have a food processor for chopping all of the fruit. But aside from that, it does look pretty easy, so I think I should be able to do it. We will see if I'm correct. But if I am going to be a professional chef, I have to look the part. So let me just get my apron on. You can't be a professional chef without an apron. And now watch me fail to tie a knot for several very embarrassing minutes. Tying a knot is what I'm doing here, by the way. I'm tying a knot, I'm making a bow. Oh, okay. Did it on the first try. I've got my apron on, I've tied the knot, and we're ready to go. So, what do you need to make mince pies? We'll do the mincemeat first, and then I'll give the ingredients for the pastry. So like I said, I've halved the original recipe. I'll put both recipes, the original recipe and the halved recipe, in the description. I didn't halve the ingredients for the pastry because if we have extra pastry, we can just make something else with it. But if we have loads of mincemeat, there's not really much else you can make with mincemeat, to be honest. I guess you could just eat it, but I wouldn't, and I eat a lot of things. So, for the mincemeat, you will need 115 grams of suet. So, what is suet? Suet is a type of animal fat. It's specifically the loin of a pig, which is this part, the kind of the inner leg of a pig. You might be thinking, You just said that there was no meat in this, but you're using the fat of a pig's loin. This gives it a really nice texture. I don't know exactly what it does, but it is important for the recipe. You can use vegetable suet, which is made with vegetable oil, which is actually what my family normally does. But I wanted to try the traditional way and use beef suet. So we'll see how this goes. You'll need 115 grams each of currants, raisins, and sultanas. As you can see, these are kind of all the same thing. They're all forms of dried grapes, but they use maybe different grapes and they dry them in different ways. Sultanas are a bit more golden or yellow in colour, and currants are a bit smaller. It just adds some nice variety. You can probably just use raisins if you don't have currants and sultanas. 115 grams of chopped apples. I have not chopped these yet. 58 grams of dried figs. I couldn't find dry figs, so I have wet figs. No, normal figs. Hopefully this is okay. It's probably fine, so yeah. 58 grams of dried apricots. 58 grams of candied peel. So candied peel is, actually what is this from? Okay, so this is orange and lemon peel. So the outside of oranges and lemons, they take them and they like cover them in loads of sugar, and that's candied peel. This candied peel has already been cut up, which is great because I don't have to cut it up. Actually, I was surprised. I thought it would be really easy to find candied peel at Christmas because it's like a Christmas food, but it doesn't seem to be that popular nowadays. So 28 grams of almonds, half a lemon and half an orange. We will be grating these to get some of the rind, the skin, and we'll also be juicing them to get the lovely juice from the insides. To be honest, I might use the whole ones, but I don't know, we'll see. 1/4 teaspoon each of nutmeg, mace, cinnamon, and allspice. I can't really describe what these spices are if you haven't seen them before, because trying to describe what a spice smells like, it smells like a spice. But nutmeg, we have in its raw form, you can see here, it's like a little nut and you grate it. So fresh nutmeg, wonderful. I love nutmeg. These are all very Christmassy spices. You know, they're really nice Christmas flavours. You've got to love cinnamon. So you can probably do with slightly different spices. I think you should be able to get these spices in most countries, but I'm not really sure. And then finally, the most important ingredient, brandy or whiskey, but I think brandy is better. It is a fortified wine, so it is a very strong alcohol. It really adds a lovely flavour, and you know, the pies come out pretty non-alcoholic. You can give them to children, don't worry, but you can also pour more brandy on or have brandy butter if you want it to be an alcoholic dessert. Oh, and that's 43 millilitres of brandy or whiskey. If you're wondering why the measurements are so weird, partly it's because I halved them, but first I had to convert them from imperial measurements, so they were like ounces and fluid ounces and pounds. In the UK it's a bit weird. We use both imperial and metric measurements, but the difference tends to be a generational one. So for me, I'm much more comfortable using metric measurements. But my aunt, who wrote the recipe in 1990, I think, wrote it using imperial measurements. So I guess it depends on what scales you buy. Scales are... This is a set of scales. You put things on the scales and it tells you how much it weighs, but these ones do grams and ounces and pounds, so you can switch between them because it's all very chaotic here. I'm sorry. We're not as bad as America, but we're still pretty bad with our imperial measurements. Okay, and for the pastry, you'll need 2 pastry cutters. one slightly larger than the other. So this will be for the base of the pie and this will be for the top of the pie. 225 grams of plain flour. This bag has a cut in it, so I have to be really careful. 115 grams of butter. 115 grams of sugar. We love sugar. 1 whole egg and 1 egg yolk. The yolk is the yellow part on the inside of the egg. So I will have to separate that. And finally, a teaspoon of cinnamon. So we can use cinnamon in both parts. How exciting. Okay, so I've got all of the ingredients in front of me. This is much more organized than I ever normally am with cooking. So we're going to make the mincemeat now. Before I start, I'm just going to read through the instructions and then I might do things slightly differently. So you put the dried fruits, apples, almonds and candied peel into a food processor. I don't have a food processor, so I'm going to have to chop them by hand, which will take a long time. Then you mix well in a large bowl with the suet and the brandy or whiskey. You add the grated rind of the lemon and orange. So the rind is the outside, you grate the outside, and you add the juice of both. You add the spices, nutmeg, mace, cinnamon, and allspice, and then you mix it all together, and you're done. Now, you can store mincemeat for a really long time. If you store it in an airtight jar, like this one, for example, this would need to be cleaned first, but yeah, it's airtight, so no air will get in. You can keep it for a really long time, maybe even like a year. I wouldn't recommend it, but I think my grandmother sometimes made mincemeat and then used it the next year. I wouldn't do that. So I'm going to go over there and chop everything up, and that's going to be a very long process, so it will probably be dark by the time I finish. I'll see you in a minute. Okay, so as you can see, I'm done with the mincemeat. I think it came out pretty good. I've tasted a bit. It does taste weird because it has the suet in it, which hasn't been cooked. So anyway, next is the pastry. So I'll just read out the instructions and then I'll show you me doing it. Rub butter into flour like this. Stir in the sugar and cinnamon and bind together with the eggs. So bind means to stick together, right? Because until you put the eggs in, it's going to be very powdery. Use largest pastry cutter. These are the pastry cutters for the base of the pies and the second largest for the lids, the tops. Add about 1 heaped teaspoon. So this is a teaspoon. It's the smallest kind of spoon. It's the kind of spoon you use to stir your tea. A heaped teaspoon means it's got lots on the spoon, like a big teaspoon. 1 heaped teaspoon of mincemeat for each pie. Don't overfill, so don't put too much in. Bake at not more than 180 degrees centigrade for around 20 minutes. Leave to cool for 5 to 10 minutes in the trays. This is a baking tray. This is what we'll be cooking it on, although I'll probably be using larger trays. Before removing to cool on this, a wire rack. This is a wire rack. So you put this on the table and you put the pies on them when you're done and they cool down. I only have one and I don't know if this will fit 24 pies. It will probably fit 24 pies. We'll find out. Alright, so I'm going to go back to doing everything and I'll talk to you when they're complete. So I messed up. So I realized after I put these in the oven that I was supposed to use one of these pans. What do you call this? A cupcake tray, or yeah, I guess a cupcake tray or a muffin tray. because then they would actually be the right shape. Oh well, to be honest, I usually make some kind of stupid mistake when I cook or bake because I'm not the most experienced chef. As mistakes go, this isn't the worst. I think the problem is because they weren't, hugging the side of these, I couldn't get a lot of the mincemeat in them. So even though I said I wouldn't, I put the rest of the mincemeat in this jar, and I guess I'll have to try again with the correct tray. But luckily, this keeps a really long time, so I can always make this in January or something. Anyway, let's see if these actually taste good. They're still a bit warm, but I'm impatient. Like, look how flat that is. It's so stupid. Okay. Mmm. Mmm. There's not really enough filling inside, but it's not bad. The pastry is very nice. I mean, it tastes like a biscuit, like a sugary biscuit, with lots of fruit. I can really taste the fig in there. A bit of the brandy. Yeah, I'm happy with how these came out for my first attempt. You can reheat these in the oven or microwave them for about 20 seconds. In my family, when we make them the correct way, we like to heat them, usually microwave, then you take the lid off and you pour on some brandy or put on some brandy butter. Brandy butter is really easy to make, so I really recommend doing it because it just adds a bit of to your food. Anyway, Merry Christmas. Thank you for watching this video. Thank you for supporting the Patreon if you do so. If you do support the Patreon, then you will have got this video 1 month early than everyone else on YouTube. People on YouTube watching, Christmas has already happened, sorry, but you can still make these. Thank you for listening to the podcast, and I'll see you all in 2023. Bye!